I'm sorry, we have no vacancies tonight. We're fully booked.
There are some other hotels up the street. Do you know anything about them? Can you recommend another hotel?
Well, there's the Manitoba House.
There is the Manitoba House, but if you go there, you gotta be careful of this man named Constance. He's their hotel runner. You want to stay clear of him. He preyed on an out-of-town traveler at the Union Depot. He grabbed the man's valise and then shoved him into the Manitoba House. Got him a room over there. And then he took the guy to a Fifth Street brothel where they put dope in his drinks. A while later, the police found the poor traveler staggering around in the downtown streets, and that missing valise was gone, and nobody ever found the $1,000 inside it.
But if you do wind up at the Manitoba House, I would advise you just to stay out of the bar. There's always rough individuals hanging out in that bar, and they're not shy about robbing the hotel guests. If you take a room up there, just stay in your room and make sure you keep those doors securely locked. Last week, a thug in the bar, he had a shootout with a policeman and they exchanged shots until they both ran out of bullets. The cop then chased the crook down into the train yards and he beat him with a club until he surrendered. The Manitoba bar is a rough place. Manitoba House, that's a great place to stay if you're a dead drunk. And many of them do. The police often carry out people who drank too much, who drank themselves to death. In fact, last week, 6 harvest workers from Dakota stayed there, and they drank non-stop for 6 weeks. Their room was an appalling mess. And when the chambermaid arrived, she found that one of the men was already dead, and another one vomiting himself to death. The police were summoned, but they were driven back by the stench. It's very rare that 2 men drink themselves to death in the same room at the same time. At least I think so. And I hope the management cleans up that room a bit before renting it out again. You can stay at the Manitoba House, but just don't fall prey to some of the people that are in the bar. There's a lot of thieves and ruffians down there. There were 2 Germans that came to the Manitoba House last week, as a matter of fact, and they were looking for work. And these guys over at the Manitoba House bar, they took them down to the Great Western yards and hinted about opportunities for finding work. And once they got into the yards, the locals beat up these Germans and robbed them. The police heard their cries for help, but it was too late. They could just watch the battered Germans trudge back to their room at the hotel. If you can't find an alternative to the Manitoba House, then stay in your room. Don't go down to the bar, and whatever you do, don't go down into the basement for any reason. The police just broke up a whole bunch of traveling bums that were living in the basement. They were down there drinking buckets of beer, and one of the bums, he had this grotesquely burned arm that he was going around showing people on the street in order to panhandle the pedestrians. The sight of his arm made the police cringe, and the leader of the group, this guy named Leavenworth Bill, had deliberately maimed this man's arm. It supplied the revenue for the group's buckets of beer. The police have evidently kicked them out of town now, but they could just as easily return. But you probably don't want to stay in their basement if that's the only place that they have to offer. There's the Commercial Hotel. If you aren't afraid of fires during the night and you're a pretty brave soul, you might want to consider the Commercial Hotel. There are probably plenty of rooms available there because they just had a nighttime fire. All of the guests would have burned to death. A patrol officer going by noticed smoke coming from the hotel, and he kicked open the hotel door and then banged on all the individual hotel rooms, waking up all the hotel guests. They believe that the source of fire may be found somewhere in the hotel kitchen, and they're trying to be especially careful right now while they're looking into it. There's the Rossler Hotel. The Rossler Hotel is a reasonable hotel, but they've had it a bit hard lately. Last week, a morphine addict took a room there, and he overdosed. A porter found him dead with an empty pack of morphine tablets on the nightstand. The staff there, they need a respite. A second morphine overdose would just be too much for them. If you don't use morphine, you might make a good guess for the hotel at this point. You might be able to find a room at the Rossler Hotel now. They've had a lot of bad press lately. They had a guy named Captain Gray stay there, and they should be more discerning with the quality of their guests. But at any rate, this man drank a whole bottle of laudanum, and Gray had enough money to buy the bottle of laudanum, but not enough for his hotel bill. And they found this out when the hotel staff rummaged through the dead man's pockets. But they may have a room available for you now.
There's the Merchant's Hotel.
The Merchant's Hotel is the oldest and most expensive hotel, but if you're looking for a reasonably priced room, you might be in luck because a smallpox incident involving a sick bellboy happened about 2 weeks ago, and I have it on good authority that the hotel was just fumigated from top to bottom. Lunatics can stay at any hotel, and the Merchant's Hotel, although it's a good hotel, is not immune from maniacs. Difficult patrons are not commonly found at the Merchant's Hotel, but that was a bit different recently when a man named Dr. Gordon, a man that was impersonating himself as a medical doctor, checked into the hotel. Dr. Gordon came down to the lobby wearing a faked beard. He then oddly stuffed toast and poured coffee into a water pitcher, and then while armed with a loaded revolver, he began terrorizing pedestrians on the street. The police came, and when they inspected his hotel room, they found that Dr. Gordon had torn up the mattress and the bed linen. They discovered a medical chest that was full of both cocaine and morphine vials. I would think that a hotel like Merchant's has long since refurbished that room, so that might be a possibility for you if they have a room available. You might find that the Merchant's Hotel is ordinarily quite quiet. It's mostly businessmen who stay there. They keep to themselves. Nobody noticed the despondent shoe salesman who shot himself through the head in his room. He became despondent while working in a competitive sales territory. He wrote some letters and then committed suicide. When his corpse was discovered sometime later, they had a hard time prying his finger from the trigger because rigor mortis had set in. The shoe company was very upset about this because he was a replacement for another salesman who also blew his brains out. If you get a freshly painted room, that's probably the reason why. Many rich and famous people stay at the Merchant's Hotel, and some of them never leave. There are also special clubs and secret societies that I know meet there. I'm not saying that they're always there, but they're sometimes there, and nobody really knows. And there is this one group that's been in the news lately that was staying at the Merchant's Hotel. They're the North Dakota Suicide Club. And when men in the club would lose wagers, they would have to commit suicide. And recently they were playing a game called 7 Up, and the loser had an obligation to shoot himself. And one of them was Fargo's former mayor. He blew off his temple and most of his forehead. It was a membership-only proposition, so it probably would not be a matter of concern for someone like yourself who wasn't in the club, but you might want to be aware of it and avoid intermingling with these types of clubs, because they can be very dangerous.
There's the Helping Hand Mission House.
If you're looking for a really cheap place to stay, there's sometimes rooms available over at the Helping Hand Mission House. In fact, I know that there's a room that's available now because they just had a minor smallpox scare. The health department just did a raid over there and they took out this guy named Brown who had smallpox. He had just checked in, so the disease didn't have that much time to spread. Brown's room might be free because he's now being held in quarantine. If you do get a room at the Helping Hand Hotel, you want to stay clear of this guest that goes by the name of Mr. Grimes. He's a really strange character who pours carbolic acid on his skin, and then he demands money from people for his wounds when he begs. And if people don't give him change, he tries to hypnotize them. And when the police came by to talk to him, he explained that an unfamiliar man on the street was controlling his brain. So this is one guest that you want to try to avoid if you're staying at the Helping Hand.
There's the Metropolitan Hotel.
If you're just looking for a place to sleep and not to eat, then the Metropolitan Hotel might be a good alternative. They recently had a waiter strike over there, and I don't know if the restaurant is open. The French restaurant manager got into a conflict with the waiters about the placement of the tables, and then he went berserk. He went after the waiters with a meat cleaver and a butcher knife, so I'm not sure if everything is so peaceful over there right now. Normally, the waiters at the Metropolitan Hotel provide a fine dining experience and not a brutal bloodbath. But lately, there was a fight between two of the restaurant waiters, a Mr. Pickens and a Mr. Smith, and the fight was over a pat of butter that one snatched from the other's tray. Pickens slashed Smith's throat with a razor, and blood spurted in the dining room entryway. The dining room manager threatened Pickens with a coal shovel. He backed away from Smith, ran out the back door,
And escaped through the train yards.
at least that's what the authorities think. But he's not likely to come back, so I think the scene is quite safe right now. It's not every day that there's a bloodbath in a restaurant, kitchen, or the dining room. The Metropolitan Hotel has probably quieted down a lot since last week. They had a bit of an ordeal there when a hotel guest suddenly took a chair from his hotel room and threw it out the hotel window. The crash of the glass on the pavement was just the beginning. Then he ran downstairs and began to destroy the hotel lobby. He terrified the guests, who all hid or ran for cover, and it took 4 policemen to subdue him. He had a manic outbreak that was fueled by his upcoming wedding and reversals to his financial dreams of becoming a wholesale grocer. The wedding guests had already started arriving at the hotel, so it was a big ordeal. But I think that's all over now, so it could be a good place to stay for the night. The Metropolitan Hotel has a very nice lobby, and now they've cleaned it up with all the blood that was there. Recently, this man named Clapp ran into the hotel lobby, clutching his neck and moaning in pain. He was bleeding profusely all over the carpeting and the furniture, and when they asked who slashed his throat, the dying man said, "Doctor, doctor." It turned out a romantic rival cut Clapp's throat in Rice Park, right across from the Metropolitan Hotel, and then ran off. The public already had begun to gather on the blood-splattered sidewalk to discuss the murder, and as the crowd grew, it became a large procession that went down to the morgue and demanded entry to view the murdered man's corpse. The situation became very heated when the coroner refused their entry. As night fell, the police were having a difficult time finding the murder weapon, the knife, so the public was helping with the search. The blade was eventually found by a boy who eventually turned it into the police rather than keeping it as a souvenir or showing it off at school. If you stay at the Metropolitan Hotel, you need to make sure you have enough money to pay your bill. Sometimes this happens that people don't have enough money to pay their bill. In fact, recently a religious scene painter, he had painted many murals in the Twin Cities churches, abandoned his wife there at the Metropolitan Hotel. He just ran off with another woman and left the hotel bill to his penniless wife. The hotel then kept the poor woman's trunk for collateral for the bill.
If you aren't generally bothered by ghosts, the Metropolitan Hotel might make a suitable place to stay. Recently, a Civil War general, Richard W. Johnson, had caught pneumonia and died in his room. If you mysteriously hear a cavalryman's spurs walking the halls at night, it could be that he has not entirely departed from the hotel.
I'm sorry we weren't able to offer you a room tonight, but at least I hope that you find a safe place to stay and don't have to sleep in the gutter or some dangerous hotel. To stay updated about dangerous places in the city, you may want to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And please don't forget to hit the notification bell to stay fully informed. Until next, safe dreams and safe travels.